Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin Schall, Alex Wolfe. Today we tell you how the Knicks went from a bottom 10 offense a year ago to a top 5 offense this year. All the stats, all the anecdotal reports coming up right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And we wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We're now available on all platforms, and that includes on YouTube. So if you're somehow not subscribed already, first of all, what are you doing? You got to question some life decisions. So when you get a chance, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell so you never, ever miss an episode. But who is just pestering you to subscribe to their podcast? Well, I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. Alex, this feels like something of a reunion. I have had an insane broadcast schedule of late, so we've not been able to do a bunch of these together. But man, first of all, what a win over the Brooklyn Nets last night. I didn't get to say that. I feel bad because my Nets loving roommate is within hearing range. But that was an incredible win, and it inspired this podcast.
Yeah, I for anyone that listened to my game recap, I made sure to gloat that final score at least 4 or 5 times throughout the episode, and also that first half score of 81 points. And that really got me thinking, and I mentioned it on that episode, like just take a moment and appreciate just how much better this team is this year, how much more fun they are to watch, and how much better on offense they've gotten. Like, I can't even think of the Knicks of the past few years scoring 142 points in a game. And yet here we are with them doing it and scoring 81.5, when in previous years, 81 in a full game was considered like, I wouldn't say a good effort, but that was like something that you wouldn't be surprised to see at the end of a Knicks game sometimes over the last couple of years. So I wanted to look at the stats and kind of see last year versus this year, and then we can sort of like contextualize that and try to figure out like all the ways that the Knicks have gotten better this year and why, through some stats and some anecdotal evidence from obviously watching all the games, although we haven't watched 3 times. So I don't know. We'll see how we do. That's almost becoming like a deep cut meme at this point somehow, the 3 times thing. So far away. That was from the dark times.
Clearly,
anyway.
You know what, Alex? It's working. Give the guy credit. maybe he's watching 6 times now. Who knows?
Tibbs is up to 8 times per game now at this point. Anyway, so I wanted to look at first points per 100 possessions. And so for anyone not familiar, this is sort of like the common way to look at stats now in the NBA, because it's like not every team plays at the same exact pace. Not every team, plays, like some teams play more transition. Some teams play more of a half court style. Some teams play a little bit more of a mix of both. So that can skew like just regular old points per game, because not every team is having the same amount of possessions per game, because some teams just run out the shot clock more than others and stuff like that. So this is the way that, the stats community sort of made things easier to understand. It's just like straight up, like all these teams per 100 possessions, what do you do? So this year, the Knicks in points per 100 possession differential, meaning how much better or worse they're doing than their opponents this year per 100 possessions. They're a plus 3.5 this year, which is good for 7th in the NBA. And they last year were a minus 0.1, which was 18th in the NBA. So they've had an 11 spot jump in that category so far this year. Points per 100 possessions, though, is where things really get awesome. If you're a Knicks fan, that's the amount of points that the Knicks are scoring per 100 possessions. They're at 118 this year, which is good for 4th in the NBA. They were at 110.9 last year, which was 21st in the NBA. So from the bottom third of the league up to top 5 this year, with almost a 7.1 point improvement. And then on the defensive end, things have actually gone down a tiny bit, which I think is kind of funny. It's almost like a microcosm, or I guess maybe a macrocosm of like what happens when you add a player like Jalen Brunson, who's so sublimely talented on offense, but not the best point of attack defender. They actually are 17th in the NBA this year in points allowed per 100 possessions at 114.5, and they were 11th last year at 111. So that tells me like the offense has gotten that like so much better that their defense was actually allowed to get a little worse, and they're still sitting at top 7 in the NBA in points differential per 100 possessions. One last stat that I'll throw at you, Gavin, to just react to before we get into a couple other like minor stats that I thought were kind of interesting. Opponent effective field goal percentage, which is it takes into account that a 3 is worth more than a 2, so it actually like it takes into account 3-point defense in kind of an interesting way. The Knicks actually got better at that this year. So they're actually, as far as opponent field goal percentage, even if their points per 100 possessions aren't better, opponent field goal percentage has gotten better, or effective field goal percentage, I should say, 53.1% this year, which is good for third in the entire NBA, versus 52.4% last year, which was sixth in the NBA. So either way, top 6, not too shabby, but interesting to see that there's an improvement in the percentages they're holding other teams to, even if there's a little bit of a downtick in the overall points per 100 possessions they're offering.
Yeah, I think when I look at the offense, what stands out to me, and this was a great note from Jonathan Macri in his newsletter 2 days ago. What's kind of funny is the stat I'm about to reference talks about effective field goal percentage. The newsletter was 2 days ago. Since then, the Knicks have moved up 2 spots just from the Nets game, but they're top 10. I mean, arguably like top 7 or top 5, depending on what metric you're looking at. Offense, despite ranking 21st in the league in effective field goal percentage, which is basically just a summary of how efficiently you shoot the basketball, including that threes are worth more than 2 and that free throws are a thing. So why is that the case? It's because they are incredibly good at offensive rebounding, second in the league in offensive rebounding, and top 10 in the league in not turning the ball over. And Alex, I think a key to both those things are how ISO heavy the Knicks are offensively. Isolations have always been correlated with less turnovers because you're just passing the ball less. So there's less opportunity for sloppiness in that aspect of the game. And the Knicks this year have been fantastically good in isolation. They're 4th in terms of the frequency that they isolate, and they're 6th in efficiency. Julius is leading the way. He's 9th in the NBA in isolation points per game. And he's actually not last in the top 10 in terms of efficiency, when you consider Julius was one of the least efficient high volume scorers in the NBA last year, is pretty miraculous. He's actually just ahead of Joel Embiid. And then Brunson kind of provides the counterpoint where he has a little bit less volume, but he's 7th in the entire NBA in efficiency for players who have at least 2 possessions per game. And I think all that also tends to help with offensive rebounding, which we can get into with Mitchell Robinson in just a second, the backup centers in just a sec. But a more predictable offense kind of leads to a center being able to track where the shots are going to go and where they're going to come from. And more shots coming closer to the rim also leads to more rebounds for a big center. So I think all those things have kind of combined together to create a hyper efficient offense, even though the Knicks aren't really a great shooting team.
Yeah, and the other thing too is if you think about it just structurally, like because they go to ISO as often as they do, having Randle, ISO and then look to pass out, having Brunson do the same thing, and both of them are being pretty efficient with that. The 3-point shooting surrounding them becomes that much more important. And earlier this year, the Knicks were not shooting as well from 3, and now they've been shooting quite a bit better. So I got a couple other stats to throw out there as far as the 3-point shooting as a team. So as a team, they're actually shooting in the top half of the NBA from 3 since the calendar turned to 2023, which is 27 games. That seems to always be like when the new year turns, that always seems to be like a big thing for a lot of players on the Knicks. I don't know what it is. It's like not even like, and I guess maybe it is almost an even halfway point of the season. It's got to be pretty close, but regardless, 27 games since the year turned over, the Knicks are shooting 37.6%, which is 14th in the league, which is the top half, which is honestly better than you could say for any Knicks team in recent memory. Like they've traditionally been extremely streaky as a team and struggled to crack even the top 20 most years recently. So the fact that they're top half of the league right now, considering how good they are in the other aspects with the ISO scoring and the offensive rebounding and everything else, is a pretty good combo. Earlier this year too, just as a reminder, and I mean we were pretty worried about this earlier in the year. I remember they were literally one of the worst teams in the NBA shooting the three for about 2-3 months. I want to say almost all the way up until like the year turned over. They were bad. It was like them, the Lakers, and some of the tanking teams down there just stinking it up from three, shooting like 32% or something. I had like, I forget what I set my filter to through like December 10th or something, but they were at 32.1% at that point, third worst in the league. So I just think that 3-point shooting, it has always been one of those things that has kind of kept this team from being good too. And like, especially last year, I thought things got so much more streaky from out there. And one of the main factors in like 20 to 21, for example, that was so dependable was the Julius Randle kicking out to either Reggie Bullock or RJ Barrett. And they were shooting like 40% from three, and Immanuel Quickley shooting around that. And that was part of what made that team so good. I think now what's made them even better is that Randle's taking a better shot profile. Randle's looking to pass more. They now have Brunson, which is obviously a huge difference of both those tiers, going from Elfrid Payton or Kemba Walker or Alec Burks at point guard to freaking Jalen Brunson, who just won Player of the Month, by the way. Congrats to him. And then like the other thing is just like the fact that they have that increased offensive rebounding helps, and the fact that they have like more shooters now pretty much all the time. They have shooters ready to go. There's just so many things that are helping them right now to become an even better offense. But I think we can get a little more granular in just a second and start looking at some of the stats. But Gavin, do we want to real quick let everybody know where to place some bets, perhaps on some Knicks going forward?
Yeah, there's only one place to do it, Alex, and that is FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the midway point of the NBA season. It's a little bit past it even, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money lines to points scored and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Alex, I know you love a good same game parlay. Anything you have your eye on as the season winds down from a Knicks perspective?
You know what? I do love same game parlays, but I'm going to pump up Immanuel Quickley for 6-man. Get your money in while you can. I think it's still holding that around plus 1,800 or something. Clearly, it's getting a lot of money from people, and Vegas is bringing the odds down quite a bit, but it's pretty good odds to buy in on it. Plus 1,800, $10 bet wins you $180 that way. So check it out. Go find what the odds are right now for 6-man of the year for Quick.
Yeah, not too bad. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay, so don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And with that, we are back on Locked On Knicks, and I think the most obvious place to look, Alex, and it's certainly the first place my mind went, is when you're talking about overall offensive improvement, is the point guard position, right? And it's as simple as this: Jalen Brunson just completely outclassing what we got from Kemba Walker and Alec Burks a year ago, averaging 26 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds per game on 59% true shooting. Kemba, when he played, 12 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds on 54% true shooting, with somehow dramatically worse defense than Jalen Brunson. Alec Burks, I only did games without Kemba for Burks, so when he was the nominal point guard for the Knicks, 13 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists on 54% true shooting. So Brunson is a much better scorer in terms of his volume and a much more efficient scorer. And correlated to that stat, I think, is the Mitchell Robinson effect. So the Knicks shot 1.1% worse with Mitch on the floor last year. This year, they're 3.1% better. And to me, that is all about Jalen Brunson. Not only does he create easy offensive rebounds for Mitch, like when he does miss, just because of the types of shots that he takes, but he is just so efficient and is such a good, I think, more than anything else, Alex, in between game, right? Like what he does in the mid range that is as good or better than pretty much any other point guard in the NBA. it is kind of the perfect skill set for a paint bound center like Mitchell Robinson, because he is just not as reliant on finishing at the rim as Knicks point guards in the past, and really just point guards in general are in the NBA. You combine that with the fact that he added self-created threes this year. When that was a shot that, one, he just didn't really shoot that often in the past, and two, when he did shoot it, he wasn't very efficient with it. You combine those things, he's essentially the perfect point guard to pair with Mitchell Robinson. And I think because of that, we're getting a career season for Mitch, not only in terms of some of his stats, but just in terms of his impact, because you're not suffering as much for him being parked at the rim, and in turn, the opponent's center being parked at the rim at all times.
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson, the self-proclaimed best center in New York, as he created waves today on Twitter. Yeah, I'm with you. Like, obviously, Brunson, everything starts with Brunson as far as the Knicks getting better on offense this year. Like, the numbers I don't even like. I don't know how you could possibly even do it justice. Like, just the effect that he has on the court of what he does on offense compared to what the Knicks have gotten out of that spot in the past. Like, it's so easy to just like think back and be like, remember like Alfred Payton, who could semi get to the rim but could never score there, who could not shoot at all from three. So essentially, if he was left alone, he was like, or if he was out like in the corner, he would just get left alone. And the times that he did decide to shoot it, it was not pretty. And the other times they would just be like, okay, well, we'll just wait until he gets inside, and then we could see, we could do that way. And then Kemba Walker just clearly had no ability to break a defense down anymore. So we actually saw some decent like pull up and spot up shooting from him from time to time, although he even was having a little bit of difficulty like generating the burst to get to his spots off of like a pick and roll, to just kind of like use a pick to free himself up and get a shot off. So even that was sort of diminished last year, but like his ability to break down someone on offense was completely gone last year. So he was not able to get to the rim at all. And then Alec Burks was able to shoot the three. He actually even was okay at like self-creation and stuff. So like that part was fine. But as far as breaking down the defense and initiating, he left so much to be desired, because essentially he was able to get to the rim. Like, I don't want to say it will, but almost it will. And yet finished like the worst maybe in the entire NBA for the amount that he would shoot there. Like 39%, I think, was the number that he shot at the rim last year, which is just like a solid 20 to 30 points less than what you want that number to be, which is absolutely insane. So it's, Brunson is like where everything starts here. I think the other thing, if we're going to highlight another player that I think has made a huge difference, I just mentioned him a second ago in the FanDuel read, but like Immanuel Quickley this year, I think has been almost as big of a revelation as Brunson in the starting lineup. And maybe not necessarily because he's gotten that much better, but because he's been given that many more opportunities. So his on-off numbers, which we've been referencing a little bit. So last year, the Knicks were actually a plus 13.8 with Immanuel Quickley on the court versus him off the court, which is awesome. That is a great number. That's per Basketball Reference. This year, they're a plus 8.7 with him on the court versus off. So wait, are you telling me he was good all along? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. He's been good this whole time, and he just wasn't getting opportunities. What's even funnier is like some of his stats that you would maybe think like, oh, these presumably are better this year, aren't necessarily. Like his assist percentage was 23.5% last year, is actually only 16.3% this year. His usage percentage is down from 24.2% last year to 19.5% this year, which usage percentage is amount of time that you finish a play either via a shot or an assist. But like, it just feels like he's as involved as ever. Like his defense is so good. He's moving the ball around. He's just kind of always a part of what's going on, whether Brunson's on the floor or not. And he's also the big number for him. And I keep going back to threes because threes are just so important this year for this Knicks team, but he's shooting 36% from three now. And that's rising still at the moment because he's been shooting quite a bit better in the last half season's worth of games, which is 41 games since December 3rd. He's shooting 38.1% from three on 5.5 attempts per game. He's also shooting 39% on 3 catch and shoot threes per game this year, and he only shot less than 33% on 2 attempts per game on catch and shoot threes this year, which shows how much he's gotten better at being like an off-ball player and taking advantage of those spot up opportunities that come from playing off of a Jalen Brunson and a Julius Randle. And then lastly, Gavin, you pulled this stat, but he's 5% better at the rim this year and 7% better as a mid-range shooter this year. So even if the usage percentage and stuff like that isn't higher, Quickley is making so much more out of the opportunities given to him this year.
Yeah, I mean that's what stands out to me just watching him, right? I mean, his ability to get to the rim, I mean, his frequency at the rim is up too, not by as much as I thought it would be, but it's up. His accuracy there, he is physically, and we noted this, like I think as early as the first couple of games of the season, and the turn started last season. Like I always cut back to the Wizards game that I think it was either the Wizards or the Raptors. That was the final game of the year, but both those games for Quickley, where I was like, all right, he is separating from his defender easier than he did in the past. And you could see he's stronger at the rim. He's more able to finish through contact. And in the mid-range game is kind of gotten crazy for him because it's not really easy shots. Like he's not that Chris Paul's shots are easy, but Chris Paul, like especially in his prime, could create a lot of separation in the mid range. Quickley doesn't really do that, but he takes advantage of the fact that he's decently tall for a guard at 6'3", and he has those long arms, and he gets pretty high up in the air to just kind of elevate and hit. And I think because of his speed, defenders tend to play a little bit off of them, and he's so good at getting guys off balance that he ends up finding really good looks from the mid range. But Alex, I also wanted to touch on Julius Randle, because we've seen before our eyes a guy who recommitted to being great this year, and it's come into play. But before we do that, let's step aside one final time, and when we return, we're going to come back and talk about Julius Randle. All right, we're back on Locked On Knicks. I think in my mind when I wanted to start off with Julius Randle. Time of possession stats, like how long he's holding the basketballs. My instincts were, all right, he's been so much better at getting off the ball quickly this year. And it's actually not as crazy as I would have thought, right? He's down 7 touches per game, which is pretty significant, right? But not necessarily like astounding. It's something like he's touching the ball 10% less per game. His minutes per game with the ball, he's down from 4 minutes per game with the ball last year to 3.5 minutes per game with the ball this year. But where the numbers really start to turn is in terms of his efficiency. He is 67th percentile in the league for the power forward position in points per shot attempt this year. So that's just sort of a catch-all statistic for how efficient he is when he shoots the basketball. He was 6th% in the NBA last year. That means if you take a random sampling of 100 power forwards in the league, Julius would have been the 95th worst last season. So that is not good. And this year he's above average. So that's pretty incredible. He's 7% better at the rim, 11% better on short mid-range attempts, and 4% better from 3-point range. So Alex, we've seen a guy who, and visually this has been backed up, but who at every single level has become more efficient, is scoring the ball more, touching the ball less. Like it's all good stuff for Julius Randle.
Yeah. And the biggest thing too has become like his shot profile as well. You know, he's shooting just such a better, he's making better decisions about where he's shooting the ball. Like, for example, his shots at the rim, this is for cleaning the glass. I just pulled this right now as you were saying that, because I was like, oh, this, I bet you that this is going to bear out in this. So this year he's shooting 29% of his attempts at the rim, which is good for the 53rd percentile in the NBA. For him, it's the forward spot considered on cleaning the glass. And then he was 16th percentile last year in attempts taken at the rim. So he's clearly doing a lot better there. And he's down a little bit in like percentile this year, although actually they changed his designation from big to forward from last year to this year. So some of these numbers, it's a little, I wish they would just keep his designation the same. But so he actually went from, he's shooting 11% more of his shots from 3 this year than last year, which the percentile numbers can't really be trusted here now, because last year they considered him a big, and this year they consider him a forward, which is a huge difference in terms of how that data is going to play out. But he took 28% of his attempts from 3 last year versus 39% this year. So like we've talked about that on the show before, but that makes it more acceptable. The fact that, I mean, even earlier in the season, like granted, he's caught such fire lately that now he's shooting, I think, like 35%, almost 36% from three. So it's gotten better, and that's like honestly a pretty solid number. That's like around league average. But the fact that he's taking those shots and yes, he's shooting worse than he did 2 years ago in 20 to 21 when he shot like over 40%. But if you're taking more threes and hitting 36% of them versus taking more mid-range shots and hitting like 44% of those, if you bear the math out, that's where that whole like effective field goal percentage thing comes in. And shooting more threes is good in terms of efficiency if you can hit them at like a league average or above level, because then you can like get more bang for your buck. Essentially, if you can hit those shots at a 36% clip versus like a 40 something percent clip for mid-range, you're getting more points per shot attempt, which is what plays into that number that you said there.
Yeah. I was going to say real quick, I mean, it's better. Like the reason the volume matters is 36% from three is better than anything less than 54% from two. So even if he's shooting really well from mid-range, if he's not above that 54% mark, it's good that those shots become a three. And that's why that trade-off makes sense every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, I think the main thing of why Julius has gotten so much better this year, and the fact that he's getting to the rim more too. And this is more anecdotal, but the way that he is seeing the floor and the way that he's reacting to bent defenses this year, I think is so much more valuable even than his 20 to 21 self as well too, because his 20 to 21 self was so much more based on like the Carmelo Anthony style of essentially he was going to get it in the mid-range. He's going to kind of get to work and, maybe back guy down for a second, maybe do a couple jab steps, a couple hezzies, whatever, and then throw up a mid-range shot, which he was making at a really high clip that year. But ultimately, all he was kind of waiting for at that point was like, okay, I got to get hot. And once I get hot, then the doubles will start coming. And then I can start attacking a bent defense that way and kick out to guys. But even then, even in that great season, and especially last year, we saw him struggle with reading the floor in those situations and kind of cave to the pressure a little bit. Whereas this year, he's taking the opportunities to drive more. And even if he has no intention of actually getting to the rim, like we've seen lately, like one of his trademark moves is like get it at the 3-point line, start driving in, and then start cutting like horizontally across the lane instead of directly towards the hoop, and just like make the defense react to you. And even if a guy just turns around off of Quentin Grimes and looks at you and says, oh no, what's he doing? That gives you that split second to whip it to Quentin Grimes and create that opportunity that way. So like, it's so much better to be in motion and trying to create than it is to be stationary and trying to create. And I feel like he's learned that lesson this year, and it's really, borne out in how he's been playing.
No, absolutely. He is, I mean, our guy Benji Ritholtz had a whole thing on it earlier this year, but just his activity level, like I think it ends up coming into play on the defensive end as well. It's almost like once he stops moving, he doesn't really start. Or sorry, once he starts moving, he doesn't really stop moving. I almost flipped that. Speaking of guys, big guys who move under the basket, Mitchell Robinson. I wanted to just go a little deeper on what I noted earlier, where the Knicks are still a really good offensive rebounding team. In fact, Alex, you made mention of this earlier. They are a better offensive rebounding team than they were a year ago. And that is in spite of Mitchell Robinson nominally having less of a relative impact. So let me explain that. Last year, the Knicks were 5.5% better in terms of their offensive rebounding percentage. So the number of missed shots that they offensive rebounded. This season, when Mitch was on the court than when he was off, this season, they're only 1.8% better when he's on the court than when he's off. So what that actually indicates is nothing about Mitchell Robinson. What that indicates is that his backups, Isaiah Hartenstein and Jericho Sims, versus I guess the combination of Nerlens Noel when he was healthy for 10 minutes last year, Taj Gibson, and rookie Jericho Sims a year ago. His backups are actually doing a better job than the backups were a year ago. And to fully sum that up to the point, the Knicks were 6th in the league in offensive rebounding last year and 2nd in offensive rebounding percentage this year. And I'll throw in a way they've doubled down on that. Josh Hart, since coming to the Knicks, leads the league in offensive rebounding percentage for guards, not for all players. But Alex, this is something we made note of when the Josh Hart trade was done, and it's why I think the Knicks might have a little bit more lasting or staying power, I guess, in the playoffs than people previously thought. There was this whole notion a little while ago that, all right, offensive rebounding, that was so 90s, right? That was so early 2000s. That's not how basketball is played now. It's about threes. It's about running fast. It's about looking cool while you do it. Now the game is still on some level about physicality. And I think the bubble Lakers were a great example of that. The Celtics last year, when they were really rolling with Robert Williams and Al Horford, healthy and playing together at their peak, when they were just dominating the NBA, you can win in this league because you can out physical people. And I think the beauty of this Knicks team is they do have kind of the sterling efficiency numbers that you want. And to your point, they're actually now at least like over a large sample size, an upper half 3-point shooting team. But while they've gotten kind of that fanciness, they didn't lose their brute physicality. And it is, to everything we've been saying, I think that's kind of the apex of this conversation. You combine the brutality that worked for the 2021 team and what they were going for last year, even if they didn't accomplish it, which was like, all right, we want to maintain that, but we also want to shoot better. So we're bringing Kemba Walker, who for his career, one of the more efficient point guard scorers in the NBA. And we're bringing Evan Fournier, who's one of the better shooters in the NBA. And it didn't work out because you couldn't keep your defense with those two. But now the Knicks have kind of combined like there's a better way to phrase this, but I'm going to say like the brain and the brawn. This is kind of the apex of those transformations.
Yeah, you almost, if you want to look for like an example around the league, you almost have to look no further than like how the Grizzlies have struggled with Steven Adams being out, as far as like how much rebounding matters to good teams in the NBA right now. Like teams need good rebounding again. It's sort of like, it's like en vogue again, where teams were like, wait a minute, if we start just sending everybody running after every shot to get back on defense, we're passing up potential opportunities to score more points. If we could just have like even two people, like have 2-3 people will start leaking back on defense a little bit, and have even just like one or two guys like still try to box out and get a rebound, maybe things could work out kind of good in that situation, So it's been, one of these like shifting moments in the league again, where, teams are realizing like, oh, maybe like truly big men, as long as they can nominally switch a little bit, as long as they can, protect the rim and do all the other stuff that we were asking them to do when it was all just run and gun all the time. If they can also get offensive rebounds, then that's a huge skill. And we should probably stop telling them to not get offensive rebounds all the time. And to your other point, like Josh Hart is like he's such a weird player. Like I love everything about him since he's joined the Knicks. Like everything that he does on the court, like the fact that he is attacking every opportunity, like he's like Dennis Rodman or something, like to get every rebound, is fantastic, because then not only does he do that, but he has this ability to then readjust himself very well and just start hustling back if he doesn't get the rebound, and create more havoc in transition by just like jumping in front of the ball all the time and coming out of nowhere. Like for him, because of how he plays defense, is almost beneficial for him to go for the offensive rebound. And then even if his team doesn't get it, that gives him the opportunity to like streak back and get in the way of something when someone's not expecting him, because he's just so like has this like natural sense of what to do on defense and where to be. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that the offensive rebounding has been one of the biggest things. And you made sure to give props too to like the fact that like it's not just Mitch, like Hartenstein does great with that too. Sims does great with that as well. I know that, and like Hartenstein had his issues earlier in the season. Like you and I were both kind of about ready to be out on him for about like 15 games there, I think, where it was just like every time he hit the court, we were just like, ugh, like, oh God, please get him off the court. And now it's like, no, I think he's kind of found his rhythm now. Like I think he had to adjust to playing a completely different way under Tibbs. And it took him a while to understand, like, okay, you basically want me to be like Mitchell Robinson. And that's not how I was playing last year or like any other point in my career. So I guess I have to learn how to just be this big bruiser rather than like a guy who, he would get rebounds before and stuff, but he was also expected to stretch the floor some, like with the Clippers. And, just perform in a completely different offensive environment. And to his credit, he's done a really good job coming around to that as well. So I don't know, Gavin. I think we could probably pretty much wrap this up here. I know we didn't touch on everybody, like Quentin Grimes, notably, we didn't really get to. Although I think that a lot of what could be said about the 3-point shooting getting better applies to him. Like he's sort of like the direct barometer for the Knicks 3-point shooting because he's, in theory, should be one of their most prolific 3-point shooters. RJ Barrett too has had his struggles, his ups and downs this year. So I don't necessarily know that he has been a huge asset to the offense this year, although he certainly had his moments where he has been. And I hope that we see more of those going forward. We did just talk about him recently too, about how he's gotten a lot better at getting to the rim and finishing at the rim this year. Hopefully his shot comes back around soon, and then that can all kind of put itself together. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's great to be a Knicks fan right now, and it's great to be watching this offense every day.
Yeah, I'll give. I just want to send people out on a high, so I'll end with two crazy Josh Hart stats. He leads for wings. He leads the league in points per shot since joining the Knicks, and he leads the league in on off differential per 100 possessions since joining the Knicks. So if you took anything
like
away,
45.
yeah. So if you took anything away from this podcast, it's go to FanDuel Sportsbook, put in a bet for Immanuel Quickley for 6-man, and then put in a bet for Josh Hart for MVP. And if the voters have any sense of how math works, you'll be a millionaire by the end of this. But
I sense it's going to be like a Kevin Malone situation. If anyone gives you 10,000 to 1 odds on anything, you take it. If Josh Hart wins an MVP this year, I'm going to be rich.
You know what? I mean, I would. I'll just throw this out there. I would look at like this is crazy. This is a little bit of a jinx, but I would look into Knicks championship odds. You know what? Throw $10 down. Might be the best $10 you've spent in your life. It'll take some luck and some injuries, which hopefully don't happen. But anyways, he's Alex. I'm Gavin. This is Locked On Knicks. We'll talk to you soon with a recap featuring Ariel Pacheco. So that'll be a lot of fun. That'll be of the Heat game, which is a really crucial game for the New York Knicks. So we'll have that for you tomorrow morning. But until then, be good. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On.